Just as the candles on the memorial table flickered from the soft morning draft, Margaret Hollins heard the one sentence she never imagined would slice through her heart on the anniversary of her husband's death. "You're still alive?" Her daughter-in-law's voice cracked through the silence like a slap. The words didn't echo, they stabbed, sharp and intentional, dripping with the cruel confidence of someone who believed she already owned everything that should have belonged to a grieving widow. And in that moment, something inside Margaret shifted. Not anger, not sorrow, something far colder, something that had been sleeping under the weight of a year's worth of grief. Before I take you deeper into what happened next, and trust me, you don't want to miss this one, make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss the stories that make you question loyalty, family, and the hidden shadows inside the people we think we know. The morning had begun quietly, the way days of remembrance often do. Margaret had been setting out her husband Harold's favorite things, his antique pocket watch, the wool cap he wore every winter, and a framed photograph from the day they bought the farmhouse together. 42 years married. And not once had he let her carry the heavier boxes. "My job is to carry the weight," he'd always say with that familiar half-laugh. Except now she was the one holding all the weight. Grief, memory, responsibility, and most painfully, the pressure of a son who no longer stood beside her. The farmhouse sat in the center of their land, like a story trapped in time. A 2-story wooden home with weathered white paint, creaking floors, and the scent of Harold forever soaked into its corners. It wasn't just property. It was their last chapter together. And Margaret had made it clear to everyone she would never sell it. Not now, not ever. But for Lucas, her only son, and his wife Jessica, the house wasn't a memory. It was money. A way out of debt. A chance at a new car, a new lifestyle, a fresh start. As long as the inconvenient elderly woman who owned it stepped aside. And in their minds, she eventually would. People like her always did. They just needed to push. That morning, Margaret had risen early, prepared Harold's favorite cinnamon oats, and set them neatly beside his picture frame, the steam rising like a final goodbye. She had expected the day to be emotional. She had expected tears. She had expected the sting of memory. But she hadn't expected Jessica to storm into her home uninvited, boots tracking mud across the floor Harold once polished every Sunday. Jessica's face was twisted in irritation, as if she had been personally offended by the sunrise. "Where's Lucas?" she demanded, as though Margaret were her employee. "He said he'd be here already." Margaret blinked slowly, refusing to raise her voice. "He's probably on his way," she answered quietly. "It's a difficult morning for all of us." "Difficult," Jessica scoffed, tossing her hair back. "Please, it's been a year. People move on." Margaret felt something inside her tighten, but she said nothing. Not yet. Jessica walked toward the memorial table, looked down at the items, and shrugged, completely unimpressed. "You're still doing this? Seriously? You really need to let go." "Letting go," Margaret replied softly, "is not the same as forgetting." "Well, maybe you should forget," Jessica snapped. "Because holding on to that farm is ridiculous. We could sell it for $600,000, maybe more. But no, you're clinging to it like you're the only one who ever cared about Harold." Margaret steadied her breathing. "This house is the last piece of him I have left." Jessica folded her arms, eyes narrowing with irritation, before she said the sentence that would ignite everything. "You're still alive? Old lady, you should be grateful we even came today. We're trying to help you before something happens. Because honestly, you don't look like you've got many years left." The room went silent, the kind of silence that makes even air feel heavier. Margaret didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she looked up slowly, her eyes meeting Jessica's with a calmness that should have terrified her. "Get out," Margaret whispered, "before you regret staying." But before Jessica could respond, Lucas walked through the front door. And instead of defending the mother who had raised him through poverty, illness, and every scraped knee of his childhood, he took his wife's side without hesitation. "Mom," Lucas said firmly, "we're selling the house. You can move into an assisted living place near us. It's safer, it's smarter, and you don't get to guilt trip us with Dad's memory anymore." Jessica's right, you're being unreasonable. The betrayal was so blunt, so casual, that it almost didn't register at first. A son choosing convenience over loyalty. A daughter-in-law choosing greed over decency. But Margaret heard every word, and every word drew a line inside her heart. Margaret turned toward Lucas, her voice steady but edged with a quiet warning. "Your father trusted you. He believed you'd protect this land. He believed you'd respect it. Respect me." She paused. "Is this what he raised?" Lucas rolled his eyes. "Dad isn't here. Things change. People change," Jessica added smugly. Margaret looked between the two of them. Her son who wanted her gone, and the woman who wanted her erased. And right there, she realized something. Harold's death hadn't left her alone. It had left her surrounded by people who only stayed because they were waiting for what she owned. She stepped closer, her voice so soft, it forced them to lean in. "You think you know everything about this house," she whispered, "but you have no idea what Harold planned before he died. No idea at all." Jessica frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Margaret smiled, not warmly, but knowingly. "You came here for money. But what you're about to find out might cost you more than you ever expected." The shift in her tone made Jessica pause. For the first time since stepping through the door, she realized Margaret wasn't just a grieving widow. She was something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. And she had been keeping a secret, one that would change everything. Lucas didn't like the way his mother said it. Slow, deliberate, almost amused. He had expected tears, maybe anger, maybe even desperation. But not this. Not the unnerving calm that made Jessica shift her weight uneasily, her confidence flickering like a candle in a draft. Margaret had always been gentle, predictable, the kind of woman who baked pies instead of starting confrontations. But now she stood straighter, her shoulders no longer bent under grief. Something in her posture told them that the woman they thought they could push had decided she wasn't going to move, not an inch. "Mom," Lucas said, trying to recover his authority, "this isn't a negotiation. You can't keep us from selling the farm. It's for your own good." "For my own good?" Margaret repeated softly. "You mean for your benefit, your convenience, your wallet." Jessica stepped forward, her annoyance returning. "Stop twisting things. We're offering you a solution. You should be thanking us." Margaret's smile widened just enough to unsettle her. "And you should be careful," she said. "You assume Harold left me helpless. But that house you're so desperate to sell, we doesn't." Lucas let out a frustrated breath. "Mom, just tell us what you're talking about." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked toward the old wooden cabinet Harold had built decades ago. Every step she took echoed on the floorboards, the way memories sometimes echo unexpectedly. She opened the drawer slowly and pulled out a small sealed envelope, yellowed at the corners, but intact. Jessica tried to peek over her shoulder, but Margaret gently shut the drawer before she could get a better look. "What is that?" Jessica demanded. "A promise." Margaret replied. A truth your father wanted revealed only if you ever tried to do exactly this. Lucas frowned. Dad never kept secrets. Margaret looked up, meeting her son's eyes with a soft sadness. He kept one. She tapped the envelope. This one. Jessica folded her arms, then opened it, and Margaret shook her head. No. No, Jessica barked. You don't get to play games with us. But Margaret wasn't rattled. She walked back to the memorial table, placing the envelope gently beside Harold's photograph, as if laying down a card in a game she knew she would win. This house holds more than memories, she said. Your father and I built our life here, but we also protected something. Something you and Jessica don't have the right to touch. Mom, Lucas said through clenched teeth, you're being dramatic. And you're being greedy, Margaret said calmly. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. But since today is about Harold, I'll honor his wishes. He wanted you to hear the truth from me first. Jessica scoffed. This is ridiculous. What truth? That he loved this wooden shack? Everyone knows that already. Margaret's eyes sharpened. This wooden shack, as you call it, is worth far more than you know, not because of its price, but because of what's beneath it. Jessica blinked. Beneath it? What's that supposed to mean? Margaret hesitated, as if choosing her words with surgical precision. Before Harold died, he told me something he had kept to himself for 20 years. Something he buried, literally, under this land. Lucas's eyes widened slightly. Buried? What? Like treasure? Jessica's expression changed instantly, greed lighting up her face, like sparks touching dry grass. Treasure? You mean there's actually something valuable buried here? Then we definitely need to sell this place. Margaret's jaw tightened, but she didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. This is exactly why he didn't tell you. You hear the word buried, and your mind jumps to money. You've forgotten what loyalty feels like. Jessica stepped closer, her voice sharp like a blade. Listen, you can guilt-trip Lucas all you want, but this is our future. We're not going to throw away $600,000 because you want to live in the past. But Margaret didn't move, didn't shake, didn't blink. Then you should have thought about that before you insulted me in my own house. Before you tried to take what wasn't yours. Before you stood over Harold's memory and demanded a payout. Lucas tried once more to steady the situation. Mom, we didn't mean... Yes, you did. Margaret cut in gently. Both of you meant every word. Jessica's voice grew impatient. Just tell us what's buried under the house. All in good time, Margaret said. Right now, you need to understand something else. She lifted the envelope again, holding it between her fingers. The paper trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what was inside. Your father left a recorded message, she said. For you. Jessica looked confused. Recorded? Like audio? No, Margaret replied. A letter, written in his hand, dated a week before he passed. Lucas felt a knot form in his throat. He had visited his father that week. He remembered Harold's trembling hands, his thinning breath, but he never suspected he was writing anything more than a grocery list. Why didn't he tell me? For the same reason I didn't tell you, Margaret whispered, because we hoped you would choose love over greed. Jessica scoffed loudly. Enough with the melodrama. What does the letter say? You'll find out, Margaret said calmly, but not today. Why not today? Jessica snapped. Because Harold didn't want it opened until the person who would break this family's trust tried to take the land, Margaret said. And today That person revealed herself. Jessica's cheeks reddened instantly. "Are you calling me a threat?" Margaret looked at her directly, her voice calm and chilling. "Yes." Lucas swallowed hard. "Mom, please, just stop this." But Margaret walked toward him, slowly, her voice softening. "Lucas, I loved you before you even existed. I raised you through storms. I gave you everything I could. But today you stood beside someone who insulted the man who gave you life." Lucas looked away. "Your father wanted you to inherit more than land," Margaret said. "He wanted you to inherit integrity." She paused, her next words sinking like stones. "But if you sell this house, you'll lose something far more valuable than money." Jessica huffed. "Like what?" Margaret turned toward the window, staring out at the fields Harold once plowed. "The truth. And once it's gone, you'll never get it back." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." But before she could finish, Margaret said something that made both of them freeze in place. "There's someone else who knows the secret." Both Lucas and Jessica stared at her. "Who?" Lucas whispered. Margaret slowly turned back to them, the morning light outlining her silhouette like the opening of a revelation. "Someone who has been watching you longer than you think." Lucas's heartbeat quickened. Jessica's smirk faltered. Margaret rarely spoke in riddles, and when she did, it was never without purpose. The room's tension sharpened as her words lingered in the air like a cold draft. Someone else knows the secret. Someone watching. Someone waiting. Lucas stepped forward cautiously. "Mom? Who are you talking about?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. She lifted her hand slightly, gesturing toward the back window, the one facing the old barn Harold had restored just 2 years before he died. The wooden structure stood quietly under the morning light, its doors slightly ajar, as though someone had slipped inside earlier and never left. Jessica followed her gaze, a small shiver creeping up her spine, despite her attempt to hide it. "Is this supposed to scare us?" she said, rolling her shoulders. "Because it's not working." But even she didn't sound convinced. Margaret walked slowly toward the window, the soft creak of the floorboards echoing beneath her feet. She spoke without turning. "A year before your father died, he hired someone to help maintain the land. A quiet man, patient, loyal, trusted. Harold chose him for a reason." Lucas blinked. "We never met anyone like that." "You weren't meant to," Margaret replied. "Your father didn't want greed infecting him the way it has you two." Jessica scowled. "So what, you're protecting some random farmhand now, P?" "Not random," Margaret said gently. "Hand-picked." Lucas frowned deeper. "What does this man have to do with the—" He paused, trying to pick the right words. "The thing buried under the house." "Everything," Margaret said. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Is he dangerous?" Margaret finally turned, her expression unreadable, only to those who try to harm what Harold valued. She let the message sit there, pointed and unmistakable. "He's been working the West Fields, quietly, watching. Harold trusted him with the truth before he trusted anyone else, including me." Lucas inhaled sharply. "He knew before you?" "No," Margaret corrected softly. "Harold told him the location, but he told me the meaning." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "Meaning? You're making this sound mystical." "Not mystical," Margaret said. "Intentional." Jessica laughed mockingly. "So what? There's some magical treasure under the house? Some ancient family heirloom? A suitcase full of money? Or maybe Harold buried gold bars under the floor like some old Western character?" Margaret didn't blink. "It isn't gold, and it isn't money." Jessica's smile faltered. Lucas watched his mother, trying to read her face. He had spent an entire year thinking grief had reduced her to fragility, that she clung to the farmhouse because she was lonely. But now she looked nothing like a lonely widow. She looked like a woman holding a secret, powerful enough to break or bind the entire family. "Then what is it?" Lucas whispered. Margaret sat down on the old couch Harold had loved, a sagging, faded thing Jessica always complained about. She brushed her fingers across the fabric, like she could still feel Harold's warmth in it. "Your father never trusted banks," she began quietly. "Not really. Not after living through a recession that nearly cost us everything. So he created a different kind of safety for us. A safeguard. One that would protect the house from exactly the kind of betrayal happening right now." Jessica snorted. "Betrayal? Look at you twisting everything. We're trying to help you. You're making this emotional." Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment. If Harold could hear you now, he'd be heartbroken. Lucas's chest tightened, just a flicker, but Jessica's continuous jabbing drowned it out. "Stop romanticizing everything," Jessica snapped. "If there's something buried under the house, we deserve to know. We're the family. We're the ones who need the money." "You don't need anything," Margaret replied gently. "You want. There's a difference." Jessica's jaw clenched. "If this, whatever it is, belongs to the family, then we have a right to sell the property." "No," Margaret said, her voice suddenly sharp. "You have no right until you learn the truth Harold left behind. And until then, this house stays as it is." Jessica threw her hands up. "This is insane. Lucas, say something." Lucas's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "Mom, if you know something important, why can't you just tell us?" Margaret looked at him, truly looked at him, and her expression softened despite everything. "Because your father wanted you to choose loyalty first. That was his only test. He believed that if you stood for family instead of money, you'd earn the right to know." Jessica scoffed. "This isn't a classroom. We don't need to pass some moral exam." "But you failed it," Margaret said quietly. Jessica froze. Lucas looked away. Silence spread through the room like slow-moving fog. Margaret continued, her voice calm and steady. "Harold left behind something that protects the house legally, something that makes it impossible to sell without the consent of the person he trusted most." Jessica straightened, her eyes narrowing sharply. "You." Margaret shook her head. Jessica inhaled sharply. "Don't tell me it's that farmhand." Margaret didn't answer, and her silence was the answer. Jessica's face twisted with outrage. "You're telling me your husband, chose a stranger over his own son?" "No," Margaret said softly. "He chose who understood the land, who respected it, who wouldn't profit from it." Jessica turned red with fury. "This is ridiculous. Who is he? What's his name?" Margaret stared at the barn again. "His name is Rowan, and he knows the truth you're so desperate to dig up. But unlike you, he's not thinking about money." Jessica stepped toward Margaret aggressively. "Where is he now?" Margaret's eyes drifted toward the barn doors. "Closer than you think." At that exact moment, a filt sound echoed from outside, boots crunching on gravel. Slow, steady, purposeful. Jessica flinched. Lucas instinctively stepped back, uncertainty flashing through his eyes. Margaret didn't look surprised. She didn't even turn. She just whispered, almost to Harold's memory, rather than to the living, "It's time." A shadow of a tall figure appeared at the barn entrance. Jessica gripped Lucas's arm. Who is that?" Margaret finally turned her face toward them, her voice low and unshaken. the one your father trusted with everything you tried to steal. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in the stillness of the morning like a slow drumbeat. Jessica tightened her grip on Lucas's arm, her usual confidence dissolving into something closer to fear. Lucas swallowed hard, his eyes flicking repeatedly toward the barn as the silhouette approached. Margaret remained still, calm, steady, almost expectant, as if she'd been waiting for this moment far longer than just today. A tall figure finally emerged into the light. Rowan. Broad-shouldered, rugged, with the kind of quiet presence that filled a space without noise. His face was weather-tanned, his steps deliberate, almost ceremonial. He had always moved with the rhythm of someone who belonged to the land, someone who understood its every crack and whisper. And as he walked toward the house, Jessica involuntarily stepped back. Rowan didn't rush. He paused at the bottom of the steps, removing his hat respectfully before entering. Something Lucas and Jessica hadn't even considered when they barged in earlier. "Morning, Margaret," Rowan said, his voice low and steady. "Morning," she replied warmly, like greeting an old friend rather than a farmhand. Jessica blinked several times, irritation flaring back as fear faded. So this is him? This is the man we're all supposed to be scared of? Rowan looked at her quietly, unbothered by the sharpness in her tone. "I'm not here to scare anyone." "Good," Jessica snapped, "because it's not working." Margaret sighed softly, as if embarrassed by her daughter-in-law's rudeness. "Rowan," she said, "they've come today to discuss selling the house." Rowan's jaw tightened. Not a threat, not anger, just disappointment. "On Harold's anniversary?" he asked quietly. Jessica scoffed. "What difference does that make? The timing isn't the issue." Rowan raised his eyes to her slowly. "It's the only issue that matters today." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, unable to look Rowan in the eye. Something about the man's presence made him feel like a child caught misbehaving. Jessica, however, was relentless. "We're not here for your opinion. We're here for answers. Margaret says you know something buried under the house." Rowan didn't reply immediately. He looked at Margaret, waiting for her signal. She gave a small nod. Permission. Only then did Rowan speak. "There is something under the house," he said. "But it's not what you think." Jessica flashed a humorless smile. "Try me." Rowan stepped farther inside, taking in the memorial table, Harold's picture, the flickering candles. A softness washed briefly across his features. "Harold trusted me. He told me to protect what matters most on this land." Jessica's eyes gleamed. "Oh, spare us. What matters most is probably worth money, right?" Rowan shook his head. "No, what's buried has no price." "Everything has a price," Jessica spat. Margaret spoke then, her voice cutting through Jessica's greed like a quiet blade. "That's exactly why you'll never understand it." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, confused and frustrated. "Can we please just get to the point? What's underground? What is all this secrecy for?" Rowan looked at Lucas, not harshly, not accusingly, but with an unmistakable sincerity that made Lucas's shoulders sink. "Your father didn't trust you to protect the land, not because he didn't love you, but because he saw what you were becoming." Lucas flinched, as if the words had weight. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Rowan said gently, "he saw greed creeping into your decisions long before he died. He wanted someone here who understood the responsibility of keeping the land safe." Jessica rolled her eyes loudly. "Oh, please. This is a guilt trip in slow motion." Margaret straightened. "No. This is the truth, and you will hear it." Jessica opened her mouth to retaliate, but Lucas, surprisingly, held up a hand, silencing her. His face had changed. A crack of uncertainty, doubt, pain, something he hadn't shown until now. "Rowan," Lucas said, voice low. "What did he bury?" Rowan nodded once. Then he walked toward the hearth, the oldest part of the house, where soot and time had darkened the stones. He knelt beside the edge of the floorboards and tapped them lightly. The sound echoed differently, a hollow thump. Jessica's breath hitched. "There is something. I knew it." Rowan stood again. "Before you go celebrating, wait." He turned, leaning against the table. "What your father buried was a lockbox," Rowan said. "A metal one. But inside it," he paused, "wasn't money, wasn't gold, not even a deed." Jessica's face twisted in disappointment. "Then what?" she asked. "Letters," Rowan said. "Dozens of them, written by Harold. Every year, one for each year of his life here." Lucas furrowed his brow. "Letters, that's it?" Rowan nodded. "Letters to Margaret. Letters to you. Letters to anyone who would dare take this land without understanding it." Jessica's face soured. "What are we supposed to do with letters? Read ourselves to death?" Rowan looked at her, unblinking. "If you're not willing to read them, you don't deserve to touch this property." Jessica gave a bitter laugh. "You're insane." Margaret walked forward now, closer to Rowan, her eyes soft. "Harold buried those letters to protect the truth. Each one holds a piece of his history, our history. Why we built this place. Why it must stay whole. Why selling it would destroy everything he believed in." Lucas shook his head. "Why didn't he just tell me?" Margaret's voice was calm, but pained. "Because every time he tried, you brushed him off, or you said you were busy, or Jessica said it wasn't important." Lucas looked as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Jessica, however, stayed relentless. "So what? He buried a stack of sentimental paper. Who cares? That doesn't stop us from selling." Rowan's expression hardened slightly. "It does." He crossed his arms. "Because inside that lockbox is something else." Jessica froze. "What else?" Rowan didn't answer her. He looked directly at Lucas. "Your father wrote a clause," Rowan said. "Not in the formal will. In his own handwriting. Signed, dated, witnessed." Jessica's face dropped. "Witnessed? By who?" "By me," Rowan said. "And one other person." Jessica's voice cracked. "Another person? Who?" Margaret exchanged a meaningful look with Rowan, one that tightened Jessica's throat with unease. Rowan let the truth fall like a stone in water. The county legal clerk. Lucas inhaled sharply. "Meaning, Rowan locked eyes with him. "Meaning, Lucas, your father made a legal amendment." Jessica's heart drummed. "What amendment?" she demanded. Rowan stepped closer. "That this farmhouse," he paused, "can never be sold as long as Margaret is alive." Silence. Cold. Absolute. Jessica's mouth fell open. Lucas staggered back. Margaret closed her eyes, exhaling softly. "And," Rowan added, "only 2 people were given authority to protect that clause." Jessica whispered, "Who?" Rowan looked between them. "Margaret and me." Margaret sat back on the couch, her fingers brushing the edge of the envelope again. Rowan stood nearby, his presence calm, but undeniably commanding. The room felt impossibly small, crowded with the weight of betrayal, greed, and uncontrollable conflict, and long-kept secrets. Jessica's eyes flicked between the envelope and Margaret, her impatience now tinged with fear. Lucas's shoulders were stiff, torn between the mother he had always loved and the wife he had married. "This is unbelievable," Jessica finally hissed. "Letters? Clauses? Some mysterious farmhand protecting a box? You're making this up to scare us. Margaret's gaze didn't waver. Am I? Or am I finally showing you what happens when selfishness meets greed? Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. Words failed her. She wasn't used to being on the receiving end of Margaret's deliberate calmness. Every pause, every measured glance, was like a needle threading through her confidence. Rowan, silent and patient, merely nodded, as if confirming every unspoken word Margaret had said. Lucas's chest tightened. Mom, you're serious? This can't be real. Dad, he wouldn't. His voice trailed off, heavy with confusion and guilt. He was always serious, Margaret said quietly, and so am I. Jessica crossed her arms, lips pressed tightly together, clearly calculating. Fine, she spat. Then show us. Let's see what's in this envelope or under the house. I don't care if it's some trick. Margaret shook her head. Not yet. First, you must understand what you're up against. She stood, moving slowly toward the center of the room, her eyes locking on both of them. Harold built this house with purpose. Every beam, every nail, every floorboard, each piece was placed to protect more than just memories. He protected trust, integrity, loyalty, and most importantly, he protected the future of this family, if the right choices were made. Jessica snorted. Future of the family? The only future I see is the money we can get if we sell this place. You see money, Margaret said softly, because you have never known responsibility, never known sacrifice, never known love that doesn't ask for payment. Her voice hardened, yet remained eerily calm. And that is why you fail. Lucas swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. Mom, don't. Margaret interrupted. This isn't about your excuses, Lucas. It's about truth. She gestured toward Rowan. And the truth has a guardian. Rowan's eyes flicked toward the old barn. It's time, he said simply. Jessica's curiosity got the better of her. Time for what? Margaret didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window overlooking the fields. The morning light glinted off the frost on the ground, giving the farmhouse an almost ethereal glow. Harold trusted Rowan with everything that mattered on this land. Everything. Even before he trusted me completely. Jessica stepped closer, her voice now a mixture of frustration and curiosity. You're saying this guy has been watching us all this time? Margaret turned slowly, watching, protecting, waiting. Harold knew the day would come when greed would knock on this door, and today, it arrived. A sudden noise outside made all three flinch. The gravel crunched beneath steady boots. Rowan moved first, heading to the door with deliberate speed. The tension was electric, almost visible in the way Jessica's face paled, and Lucas's jaw tightened. Margaret's voice, soft but firm, cut through the uncertainty. This is the choice you've been given. Pay attention, or lose everything. Rowan returned moments later with a small, weathered metal box. It looked ordinary, almost unimpressive, but the aura surrounding it suggested otherwise. Jessica's eyes widened, greed overtaking fear for a brief instant. Finally, show us. Margaret held up a hand. Patience. She turned toward Lucas. You see, this isn't just a box. It's a lesson. And today, you'll learn it the hard way. Lucas glanced nervously at Jessica. Mom, what does she mean? Margaret smiled, faint but chilling. Everything you think you know about your father, about this house, about family, will be rewritten in the next few minutes. Jessica groaned, exasperation leaking through. I don't have time for riddles. Let's just open the box. No, Margaret said firmly. Not yet. You must first confront your intentions. You see, Harold left instructions. To touch the box, you must prove that you understand what it means to respect the past. Jessica rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath about old-fashioned nonsense. But she couldn't deny the tension in the air. Even Lucas felt it, the sense that something monumental was about to occur. Margaret approached the box and placed it carefully on the table, her fingers brushing the top as if bestowing it with solemnity. Inside, you'll find letters. Dozens of them. Each year, Harold wrote one to me. Each one contains lessons, memories, advice, and warnings. But that's not all. Her voice dropped, drawing Jessica closer, despite herself. Rowan's presence was silent but commanding. He leaned slightly over the box, as if to supervise this revelation. And there's one final item, he said quietly. Something only those worthy may see. Jessica's eyes narrowed. And what makes you the judge of worthiness? Rowan didn't answer. He simply stared at her, calm as a winter field, unyielding as the farmhouse itself. Margaret lifted her eyes toward the ceiling, as if seeking Harold's guidance. The lesson here isn't just about money or land or even legacy. It's about what kind of people you truly are. Choices define us, not desires. Lucas's hands tightened at his sides. Mom, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Margaret's voice softened, but it carried weight. No one is ever truly ready. But today, the truth will force you to see it. And once seen, it can't be unseen. Jessica's lip curled, a mixture of defiance and fear. Enough talk. Open it. Margaret nodded slowly. Very well, but know this. The truth will not just surprise you. It will judge you. She carefully lifted the lid of the box, revealing bundles of yellowed letters, tied with ribbons. At the bottom of the box lay a small, intricately carved key. Jessica gasped, eyes fixed on it. Lucas instinctively stepped back, the reality of the moment settling over him like a storm. Margaret picked up the key. This, she said softly, is the real treasure. Not money, not land, but understanding. And only those who prove themselves worthy may ever use it. Jessica reached forward impulsively. I'll take it. Margaret's hand shot up, stopping her mid-reach. No. Only by learning loyalty, respect, and truth will it yield its power. The room fell silent. The morning sun now seemed brighter, harsher, almost accusing. The farmhouse, Harold's memory, the land itself, they all seemed to be watching. And in that quiet, Margaret Hollins realized one thing. Today would be remembered not just as the anniversary of Harold's death, but as the day the true test of greed, loyalty, and courage began. The game had only just started. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind outside. Margaret's eyes flicked to Rowan, whose expression remained unreadable, stoic yet calm, like the earth itself. Jessica's fingers twitched, craving the key, craving the letters, craving the prize she believed was hers by right. Lucas's face was pale, torn between loyalty, guilt, and the crushing weight of realizing how far he'd fallen from the son Harold had once believed in. Margaret held the key carefully, as though it were a fragile heartbeat. Before you touch anything, she said, her voice steady, echoing in the farmhouse like the calm before a storm. There's one last truth you must understand. Jessica rolled her eyes, muttering, Here we go again. More lectures. but even she could sense the gravity in Margaret's tone. This farmhouse isn't just wood and stone. It's not just land or walls. It's every promise Harold made, every memory we shared, every choice we honored, and every lesson we learned. And the person who holds the key, Margaret let her words linger, heavy in the room, must honor all of it. Rowan stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the box. Harold left instructions. Only the person who values the house and its history over their own greed can use the key. Only they can access the last bundle of letters, the one that holds the final truth. Jessica scoffed, her confidence flickering. And you're telling me you're the only one worthy? Give me a break. Lucas, don't you see this is just a scam to keep us from getting what's ours? Lucas's lips parted, but no words came. He swallowed, realizing the truth in Margaret's gaze. It wasn't theatrics. It wasn't manipulation. It was real. And for the first time, he understood the betrayal, not just of his own actions, but of what he'd allowed to happen in silence all these months. Margaret's eyes softened, not with warmth, but with quiet certainty. Lucas, you have been given every chance to honor this place, to honor your father's memory, to honor the integrity he built. And you failed. But the choice isn't over yet. You can step back, you can watch, or you can learn. Jessica's impatience boiled over. Enough. You're holding us hostage with a box of letters and some stupid moral test. Open it, now. Margaret shook her head. No. First, a choice must be made. She extended the box toward Jessica, deliberately, as if weighing her resolve. Will you touch it with greed in your heart, or with respect for the life and legacy buried here? Jessica's hands hovered over the box. She glanced at Lucas, expecting him to support her. But Lucas remained silent, guilt heavy in his chest. Slowly, the realization dawned. This wasn't just about money. It was about who they had become. And the reflection staring back from Margaret's eyes was a truth Lucas could no longer ignore. Go ahead, Margaret said softly, her voice almost gentle. Prove you understand, or step back and accept what you've lost. Jessica's fingers trembled as she touched the box. Immediately, Margaret's eyes hardened. Stop, she commanded. Jessica, you failed. The box is not yours. Jessica recoiled, confusion and anger flashing across her face. What? I barely touched it. Margaret's calmness was terrifying. You reach for it with greed. Your heart is not worthy. The house, the letters, the truth, none of it is yours. Lucas stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. Mom, what happens now? Margaret gestured toward Rowan. Now, we reveal the last secret. She reached into the box and pulled out the final envelope, labeled in Harold's neat handwriting. For the one who truly respects this land. She handed it to Rowan. Rowan held it carefully, then turned to Lucas. Your father left this for the person who understands responsibility, loyalty, and sacrifice. Only they may open it. Jessica's jaw dropped. And that's who? Me? No, Margaret said softly. Not you. She fixed Jessica with a gaze that pierced. You failed today. Your greed blinded you. Lucas, do you finally understand? Lucas swallowed. Yes, he whispered. Shame and realization washing over him. He took a tentative step toward his mother. I understand now. I let you down. I let Dad down. I let everything down. Margaret nodded, a quiet, almost imperceptible approval in her expression. Then you've learned, but it's not enough to simply understand. You must act. You must choose to honor, not take. Rowan handed the envelope to Margaret, who opened it with deliberate slowness. Inside was a small, folded letter, written by Harold in his careful, trembling handwriting. Margaret read it silently, the weight of each word pressing down like the years they had shared. Then she looked up, her eyes meeting Lucas's. "Your father left me this letter for a reason," she said quietly. "It contains instructions for the house, for the land, and for the letters. It's a safeguard, and it names the one person he trusted to preserve it all." Lucas's throat tightened. Who is it?" Margaret's lips curved into a faint, almost cruel smile. "It's me, and not just me, but someone who has been watching over us, protecting everything Harold loved." She gestured toward Rowan. Jessica's face contorted in disbelief. "You mean him? The farmhand?" Margaret's smile widened. "Yes, the farmhand. The guardian. And the one who will ensure this house and its secrets remain untouched by greed." Jessica's hands shook. "You're insane. You two can't possibly keep me from—" Margaret interrupted, her voice ice cold. "You already have lost. Today, your greed, your disrespect, your lack of loyalty has sealed it. This house, this land, the letters, they will remain protected. And you will learn that some treasures are never meant for those who seek only profit." Lucas stared at his mother, finally seeing her, not as a frail widow, but as a woman with the strength of decades, shaped by love, grief, and resilience. "Mom, I get it now," he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "I'm sorry." Margaret reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Understanding is the first step. Action is the second. You'll need to make the right choices from now on, or you'll lose more than just a house." Jessica, defeated, stormed toward the door, muttering curses and threats. But even as she left, Margaret knew she wouldn't succeed. She couldn't. The house, the letters, the legacy, it was all protected. Rowan stood by, silent and steady. He and Margaret exchanged a brief glance. No words were needed. The bond between them, forged through loyalty and understanding, was unbreakable. Margaret turned to the window, looking out over the land Harold had loved. The farmhouse stood tall, steadfast against time and greed. The wind rustled the trees, carrying a quiet message. Some things are meant to endure. And as Margaret Holland sat back, letters in hand, the farmhouse alive with memories and secrets, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The anniversary of Harold's death had begun with betrayal, insult, and greed. But it would end with triumph, justice, and a legacy preserved. But as Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment, a faint shadow flickered at the edge of the barn, unnoticed, silent, waiting. The story was far from over. Because secrets, as she knew all too well, had a way of resurfacing when least expected. And for those who thought they could take what was hers, the reckoning had only just begun.